My name is Claire Bennett, and for 6 years, I let my husband believe I was an ordinary woman with an ordinary life. What he didn't know was that my net worth was $68 million. I hadn't hidden it to deceive him. I hid it because I wanted one relationship where nobody loved me for what was in my bank account. For 6 years, I thought that choice had protected my marriage. I was wrong. It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen when someone knocked on our front door. My husband, Daniel, was still at work. When I opened it, his mother, Margaret, was standing there. She had never visited without calling first. "Claire, we need to talk." "Is Daniel okay?" "He's fine." She stepped inside and looked around the living room. Her eyes stopped on the framed photograph of my father. Then she turned to me. "How much money did your father leave you?" My heart stopped. I hadn't told her. I hadn't told Daniel. Nobody in his family was supposed to know. "I don't understand." Margaret's expression hardened. "Don't insult me. I know exactly who you are." She pulled a thin folder from her handbag and placed it on my table. "What's that?" "Proof?" "Proof of what?" She leaned closer. "That you've been lying to my son." For 6 years, I had protected my secret. Now my husband's mother was standing in my home with documents proving she knew about it. But the question that frightened me wasn't how she had discovered my money. It was this: who had told her? And why had she come to me instead of confronting her own son? I opened the folder. The first page contained my full legal name. The second showed the number I had spent years keeping private: $68 million. I looked up. Margaret smiled. "Now we can finally discuss what my son deserves." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a visit. It was a demand. Margaret closed the folder and pushed it toward me. "Your husband has been struggling financially." I stared at her. "Daniel has a good job." "That isn't the point." "Then what is?" She lowered her voice. "My son deserves security." I almost laughed. "Daniel doesn't know about my money." "Exactly." Her answer made my stomach tighten. She wasn't asking me to help him. She was telling me what she believed I owed him. I stood up. "Whatever you think I have, it has nothing to do with you." Margaret's expression changed. "Everything you have now affects my son. No, my marriage affects my husband and me." She leaned back. "Do you know what people are saying?" "I don't care. They think Daniel married beneath him." That hurt. Not because I believed it, because she had apparently been saying it for years. I asked, "Who gave you these documents?" She smiled. "You should be asking why I needed them." My heart sank. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet." The word "yet" stayed in my head. Then she opened her handbag again and removed another envelope. "This is a proposal." I didn't touch it. "For what?" "A house." I stared at her. "Daniel and I already own a house." "Not a house like this." She slid a photograph across the table. "A massive property overlooking the water. We found it months ago. It's perfect for Daniel." "For Daniel?" "For the family." I pushed the photograph back. "You want me to buy your dream house." She shook her head. "I want you to invest in your husband's future." "My husband hasn't asked me for anything." "Because he doesn't know the truth." There it was. The threat hidden inside her visit. She knew my secret, and she was willing to use it. I told her to leave. She stood slowly. "You have 48 hours." "For what?" "To decide whether you want this marriage to remain peaceful." She walked toward the door, then she stopped. "By the way, Claire, Daniel has been asking questions." My heart dropped. "What questions?" Margaret smiled. "About why you suddenly have access to so much money." Then she left. I locked the door behind her. For several minutes, I couldn't move. Daniel knew something, but how much? I went upstairs and opened the drawer where I kept the only document connecting my husband to my fortune. The original trust agreement. It was still there, untouched. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We need to talk tonight. My mother told me something about you." I stared at the screen. Margaret hadn't just discovered my secret, she had already started telling my husband her version of it. Daniel came home just after 7. He didn't kiss me. He put his keys on the counter and looked at me. "What did my mother tell you?" I felt my chest tighten. "She came here this afternoon." "I know." He pulled out a chair. "She said you have money." I stayed silent. "Claire, how much?" I looked at him for several seconds. "Enough." His expression changed. "That's not an answer." "No, it isn't." He rubbed his forehead. "Mom said you inherited something from your father." I did. "How much?" I could have lied again. Instead, I said quietly, $68 million. Daniel stared at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stood up. $68 million? I nodded. He walked toward the window. "How long have you known?" "Since before we met." He turned around. "And you never told me?" "I wanted to know that you loved me without knowing what I had." His face softened for a second. Then he looked away. "I understand why you were afraid." I exhaled. "But my mother?" His expression hardened. "What did she ask you for?" I told him about the house. His jaw tightened. "She showed you that?" I nodded. Daniel sat back down. "Claire, I didn't know she was doing this." "I believe you." He looked at me. "There's something else." "What?" "My mother has been asking me about our finances for months." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "She said she thought we were struggling." "We're not." "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. There were several messages from Margaret. One said, "You deserve to know what your wife is hiding." Another, "If she really loves you, she'll prove it." I stared at the screen. Then Daniel showed me the last message. It had been sent that afternoon. "Don't sign anything until you speak to me." My heart sank. What does she mean by sign anything? Daniel looked confused. "I don't know." Then his phone buzzed. A new message from his mother appeared. "Ask Claire about the trust before she gives you another story." Daniel looked at me. "What trust?" I suddenly understood. Margaret wasn't guessing. She had seen enough of my financial records to know about the trust my father created. But there was something she didn't know. The trust had one condition. I could access the money freely, but nobody else could inherit it through me unless I personally changed the agreement. And I had never changed it. Daniel slowly asked, "Does my name appear anywhere in that trust?" I shook my head. "No." He looked relieved. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Claire, why would my mother care so much about money she can never have?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the next morning, my attorney called. He told me Margaret had contacted his office, and she wasn't asking about my fortune. She was asking about my marriage. My attorney's call changed everything. "Claire, Margaret contacted my office yesterday." "Why?" "She asked whether your trust could be challenged through your marriage." I went completely still. "Could it?" "No." I exhaled. "Then why would she ask?" My attorney paused. "Because she may be looking for another way into the money." I ended the call and immediately called Daniel. He came home within an hour. I told him everything. He looked devastated. "I never knew she was capable of this." "Neither did I." Then Daniel said something that made me realize how much pressure his mother had already put on him. "She told me you were planning to leave me." I stared at him. "What?" "She said you had enough money to disappear whenever you wanted." I shook my head. "Did you believe her?" "No." He took my hands. "I was angry that you kept the money from me. But I never believed you were planning to abandon me." For the first time since Margaret arrived, I felt relieved. Then Daniel's phone rang. It was his mother. He answered on speaker. "Mom, what are you doing?" Her voice was cold. "I'm protecting you." "From what?" "From your wife." I closed my eyes. Daniel looked at me. "You need to stop this." Margaret laughed. "She has been lying to you for 6 years." "I kept a personal inheritance private." "You hid $68 million from your husband." "Because it was mine before I met him." Silence. Then Margaret said, "Ask her why she changed the trust last year." My heart stopped. Daniel looked at me. "You changed it?" I nodded. "Yes." Margaret's voice sharpened. "See, she's hiding even more." I took the phone. "I changed it because I wanted to protect my marriage." "What does that mean?" "It means I created a separate agreement. Daniel would never be responsible for my money, and I would never use it to control him." Daniel stared at me. He hadn't known. Margaret went silent. Then she said something I never expected. "You think you're protecting him, but you're destroying his future." Daniel answered before I could. "No, Mom. You're trying to destroy my marriage." She hung up. The room stayed quiet. Then Daniel asked, "What happens now?" I looked at him. "Now we find out how far she's willing to go." The next morning, my attorney sent me one final document. It was a copy of a loan application Margaret had submitted 3 months earlier. She had listed my $68 million fortune as collateral, without my permission, without Daniel's knowledge. And somehow, the bank had already approved the application. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. It wasn't mine, but it looked exactly like mine. Someone had forged my name, and suddenly, this wasn't just about family anymore. The forged loan application changed everything. My attorney immediately contacted the bank and froze the application. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Claire, whoever submitted this had access to documents that only you and your father's estate attorney should have had." I looked at Daniel. His face had gone pale. "Mom," he whispered. We drove to the bank together. The manager showed us the application. The signature looked almost perfect. But there was one mistake. The person who forged it had signed using my maiden name. Daniel looked at me. "Your mother wouldn't know that." I shook my head. "She would if someone gave her my old documents." Then the manager showed us the account number connected to the application. It belonged to Margaret. She hadn't been trying to help Daniel. She had been trying to borrow against my fortune for herself. Daniel stared at the paperwork. "Mom used my name to get to your money." I nodded. "And she expected me to stay quiet." That afternoon, Margaret arrived at our house. She was angry. "You had no right to freeze that loan." I looked at her. "You had no right to use my identity." She turned toward Daniel. "You're really going to let her control everything?" Daniel stepped between us. "You're the one who lied to me." Margaret's expression changed. "I did this for you." "No," he said. "You did it for yourself." She started crying. "I only wanted to give you the life you deserved." Daniel shook his head. "I already had the life I wanted." He looked at me. "With Claire." Margaret stood silently. Then Daniel continued. "You didn't protect me. You tried to turn my marriage into a bank account." My mother-in-law had nothing left to say. My attorney later handled the legal side, and the forged application was reported. Margaret eventually admitted what she had done. She had debts she couldn't repay, and when she discovered my inheritance, she convinced herself that my money was the answer to her problems. But it wasn't. and it never would be. Months later, Daniel and I sat together on our back porch. He looked at me. "I understand why you kept the money secret," I smiled. "And I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you had to hide it." I reached for his hand. "I wasn't hiding my life from you. I was protecting the one thing I wanted to know was real." He squeezed my hand. "And now?" I looked at him. "Now I know." For 6 years, I had worried that telling Daniel about my fortune would change how he saw me. Instead, it showed me exactly who he was. Money didn't save our marriage. Trust did. And I learned something else. You can hide your wealth from someone who loves you, but you should never have to hide your worth. If you enjoy stories where family betrayal, hidden truths, and unexpected consequences finally come to light, subscribe to Public Evidence. Because around here, the person everyone thinks they understand usually has a story they never saw coming. Would you have told your spouse about the $68 million or kept it private?